What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Christmas. Here we are, back on our calendar, December 2020. Last time we looked at December 12th. Today we're moving on to December 13th with a little bit of the evening of December 12th action thrown in. December 13th is St. Lucy's Day. And so let's first start by talking about St. Lucy, also known as St. Lucia or St. Lucia, Sancta Lucia, also, different languages say words different. Anyway, she was born in Syracuse in Sicily, that island down there by the toe of the Italy boot, the big football that high-heeled boot is kicking. She was born in the year 283 AD or thereabouts to very rich parents. Her father died when she was about 5 years old, so she was raised primarily by her mother Eutychia. It's a Greek word meaning good luck, which maybe not so much for her, but Eutychia is worried about her daughter's future, so she tries to arrange a marriage between her daughter Lucy and a wealthy young man from a pagan family. This is a very common start to many female saints' biographies. Meanwhile, Eutychia, talking about not having such great luck after all, was also slowly dying of a chronic illness. Lucy decided that what should happen is that the two of them should go make a pilgrimage to the nearby shrine of St. Agatha. Because many miracles were supposed to have happened at that shrine. So while they're there, Lucy goes to sleep. She has a dream in which St. Agatha herself appears, telling her that through her faith, Eutychia would be cured. Lucy will become the glory of Syracuse. So Lucy wakes up. She's like, that sounds great. I want what that lady has. Maybe she didn't know that St. Agatha became famous because she was murdered and had her boobs cut off. So maybe that's what Lucy wanted. I don't know. Anyway, Lucy fully devotes herself to Christ. She says, I'm never going to marry. I'm going to take this great wealth that I have, that I know is supposed to be a dowry, but instead I'm going to give it to the poor. And this is, during the time of the reign of the Roman Emperor Diocletian, in which time Christians were widely persecuted. So this was not a cool thing for her to do, and worse yet, the man that Lucy was supposed to marry finds out that her plan is to give away all the money that was supposed to be his as part of the dowry. So he's really upset. He turns Lucy in to the governor of Syracuse, accusing her of being an illegal Christian. The governor says, Lucy, you must renounce Christ. Make a sacrifice to this statue of Diocletian. She refuses. He says, all right, you have to go live and work in a sex house now. And she's like, I don't think I will be doing that. And when the guards try to remove her, as you can see here, they had no such luck. This guy's clearly throwing his whole weight on it, cannot move this young girl. They could not budge her an inch, so they sent for more guards. They sent for a team of oxen. They try to move her from the spot. Not even 1,000 men and 50 oxen were able to move her. So realizing that they wouldn't be able to get her to move from that spot, the governor says, all right, we'll just kill her here. That's fine. So the guards build a giant fire around her to burn her at the stake. The flames have no effect on her whatsoever. And meanwhile, she's continuing to, cut a pretty sick diss track on the governor and the emperor, saying that she, a young girl, would serve as an example to give strength to all Christians. The guards were like, please shut up. So they put a spear through her throat. That didn't do any good. She continued talking, even with her throat having been pierced. So she sits there surrounded by flames, and she begins prophesying the downfall of the governor and the emperor. She says the governor will be punished, Diocletian's reign would soon be over, which would bring an end to the persecution of Christians. This made the governor so upset that he had Lucy's eyes gouged out, and then finally she says, you know what, just someone bring me the sacrament, communion, Eucharist. That's what's happening here. You can see the priest giving her the host. She says, "Just give me that," and satisfied after that, she kind of gave up her spirit and ultimately died by the sword. Her predictions did turn out to be true. The governor of Syracuse, according to the life of St. Lucy, the governor of Syracuse found himself beheaded for the crime of theft, and Diocletian's reign ended soon after, and before too much longer, Constantine, of whom you may have heard, became Rome's first Christian emperor. Now, Lucy's Latin name, Lucia or Lucia, has the same root as the Latin word lux, lux lucis, which means light. And so a number of different interpretations associate her with the idea of her as a bearer of light in the darkness. She's a patron of the blind. You can see in art she's usually carrying her own eyeballs on a plate or in a cup or some other kind of thing. Even though she has these eyes, her eyes were restored to her in her martyrdom, but these were her earthly eyes. But her feast day is December 13th, one of the darkest nights of the year, and so the idea is she's a bearer of light in the darkness of winter. She's, as I said, she's the patron saint of the blind, but also authors, knife makers, glass makers, martyrs, peasants, salesmen, stained glass workers. She's invoked against hemorrhages, dysentery, diseases of the eye, and throat infections. She was, of course, stabbed through the throat as well. So generally, the things that a patron saint protects against usually have something to do with the manner in which they died or some other miracle that they did. But yeah, in art, the emblem of the eyes on a cup or a plate. Here, that I don't know about those eyes, very strange. But here you can see also the motif of her with a dagger in the throat. That happens sometimes too. And she carries a palm branch. That's a sign of martyrdom. That's the palm of victory, right? Victory over evil. If you have died a martyr, that is the best thing you can do. You have triumphed over evil. And so you have the martyr's palm as a symbol of your triumph. So yeah, very common in medieval art to see St. Lucy carrying eyeballs on a plate. And that's how you can generally tell that you're looking at a St. Lucy. So in Scandinavia, St. Lucy's Day is on December 13th. It's a big time winter celebration. It marks what would have one spin, the winter solstice on the Gregorian calendar. Don't have time to talk about don't have time for calendar reform talk, but just trust me that the days are different than they used to be. I said Gregorian, I meant the Julian calendar, the old calendar. Winter solstice would have, look, calendar changed, and so 13, whatever, it used to be that. That's why it's different. Okay, so at one point would have been the longest, darkest night of the year. In Northern Europe, a place that is already full of long, dark nights, right, up to, I don't know, 15, 16 hours of darkness, I think, probably, at that time of the year. Yeah, here's a very common sight on St. Lucy celebrations. This is probably from Sweden, where it's most popular. It kind of spread to the rest of Scandinavia from there. So yeah, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. Lucy, or Lucia, is venerated on December 13th. What they do is they pick a young girl to represent St. Lucy. She is dressed in a simple, plain white dress with a red sash, symbolizing her martyrdom. We saw that as well in some of the representations of St. Barbara. And most importantly, she wears this crown of candles on her head. And then she is followed by a procession of other young girls also wearing white and holding a candle. Usually there's like a wet cloth draped over the head to kind of make this slightly less dangerous. Or if it's a really small girl, that you can use electric candles. That's fine too. They proceed they do like a parade-ish, a processional, and they sing a Lucia song entering the room. Each country in Scandinavia has their own different lyrics to the song, not just in their own individual languages, of course, but also there's plenty of different versions. They tend to use the tune of an old Neapolitan song called Santa Lucia, but they change the lyrics to different things. I cannot. I forgot the name of one of the more popular ones, but it's something like "Night Falls with Heavy Footsteps" or something like that. Is like the name of one of the more popular set of lyrics. But yeah, so they come in, they sing that song, then they sing other Christmas carols or other songs about Saint Lucy. So even though Lucy's Day is not an official like government public holiday in Sweden, it's very popular. At a lot of schools, universities, colleges, students have big dinner parties there because it's their last big hurrah before going home for Christmas. So most cities in Sweden, they will appoint or elect a Lucy from different schools, and they pick who her maids are going to be. And there's like a national one that appears on television, and then the different Lucys, they go around like to shopping malls, they go to elder care facilities, they go to churches or whatever, they go through and they process through and they hand out, they're singing, but also they're probably handing out like different baked goods, like cookies, like spice cookies, which is common in so much of Europe. They have ginger nut cookies, pepparkakor. That I probably didn't say that right. I'm going to say many Swedish words incredibly wrong today, and I apologize to any Swedish people who might be listening. It's not just girls in the processional. Don't worry, men's rights listeners out there. Boys are involved as well, and they have to wear these dunce caps because boys are really dumb. Just kidding. But they do wear those hats. They usually wear, a white robe like the girls, but they wear these hats that are decorated with stars of various colors, usually gold, but I've seen like blue ones and such as well. They are called Stjärngossar. I probably said that wrong, but it means star boys. Makes sense. And we'll see some other countries that have star boy processionals as well. Sometimes they might be dressed up as tomtar. Elves or gnomes that we will talk about in greater detail very soon. They might just carry lanterns, they might be dressed as gingerbread men or other appropriate things to the Christmas season. They help with the singing. They also have their own songs. The boys' songs tend to be about Saint Stephen, the Christian martyr who, if you know the song Good King Wenceslas, you know that St. Stephen's Day is December 26th. So he's another wintertime saint and martyr. The song they sing is about Stephen caring for his 5 horses. I don't know. An important part of the Lucy tradition are lucikat, which literally means Lucy cats. But they're sweet saffron buns. You can see the saffron makes them yellow. They have little raisins in there. Not 100% sure why they're called cats. I think it's supposed to be because even though they're kind of this S shape, it somewhat resembles a cat kind of curled up. I can see it. My own cat was curled up on my lap as I was writing this, and I kind of looked down and compared to the photo. I can see it. So these are very important part of the Christmas season, especially St. Lucy's Day. All right. But as we said, St. Lucy is from the city of Syracuse in Sicily, and so she's, of course, venerated there as well. On December 13th, there's this fancy silver statue of her with the knife in her neck, the martyr's palm, the eyeballs on the plate. They're there. They look very much like the old Geico commercial with the stack of money with the eyeballs on it. Maybe you guys remember what I'm talking about. But anyway, what they do is they parade the statue through the street. They carry her to the Cathedral of Syracuse. But in addition to her martyrdom, also for Sicilians, an important post-mortem miracle, which is a necessary thing for saints to have. You got to do miracles after you're dead in order to become a saint. One is that a famine ended on a St. Lucy Day in Sicily when ships loaded with grain came into the harbor on St. Lucy's Day. And so as a remembrance of that, on December 13th, it's traditional to, instead of eating bread, you eat whole grains. And the most common thing to eat is this dish called kucha, which is boiled wheat berries. Wheat berries are the whole part of the grain except for the hull. It's everything. It's the whole grain wheat. You boil it, and it's mixed with like ricotta and honey. I think this one is cream, and these look like chocolate chips to me. But I did not read the recipe. I didn't have time to read a little personal essay from this person. But sometimes you get a savory version of it where it's served as a soup with beans or whatever. So in Syracuse, you celebrate St. Lucy by eating this, heart-healthy whole grains. But St. Lucy is also popular as a children's holiday figure in northeastern regions of Italy, like Trentino and South Tyrol. Also the eastern parts of Lombardy, parts of Veneto, and then all of Friuli, which is all right up here next to Slovenia. All this good alpine adjacent and alpine area. There she is, a gift bringer. She comes and she brings gifts to good kids and coal to bad kids on St. Lucy's Eve. She comes in, according to the tradition, here she is, kind of dressed as Winter's Bride, which is kind of a recurrent visual motif that we've already kind of seen, right? We've already seen the Czech Barborki, who look kind of creepy bride-esque. Here we have a very bride-like St. Lucy. She comes with her escort, her servant Castaldo, and a donkey. And so kids are supposed to leave out some coffee for Lucia. They leave out a glass of wine for Castaldo. They leave a carrot for the donkey. And kids are not supposed to stay up and wait to see if St. Lucy comes in to deliver the gifts, because she will throw ashes in their eyes and blind them, which is an ironic fate from the one who's supposed to protect you from blindness. Yeah, so in northeastern Europe, or northeastern Italy, sorry, you get presents from St. Lucy on her day. Despite her name, however, Lucy is not always liked. Norway, for example, adopted a Swedish modern-style Lucy processions like we've seen during World War II, and it took the place of an older, somewhat more sinister tradition. This was called Lucenat, or Lucy Night. This is Lucy, Lussi, another figure who became conflated with Saint Lucy. This Lucy with S's, aka the Lucy Bird, the Lucy Bride. She leads a wild hunt-like ghostly retinue called the Luciferd through the sky. You're not supposed to work on Lucy's Eve, and if you do, you get punished. Lucy might do all sorts of things. She might wreck your chimney, scare you through the window, whatever. But between St. Lucy's Day and Christmas, her whole group of goblins, they come down, they swarm your farmhouses to make sure that you're ready for Christmas, that you've made your beer, you made your bread. Otherwise, they gobble it all up. Lucy might pop down the chimney, scare you if you're a bad kid and you didn't go to bed on time, whatever. Also, they say that St. Lucy's Eve is the only night when animals can talk. We're going to see that tradition is not universal, because there is a different night that they say animals can talk. Spoilers, it's Christmas. But more dark Lucies to follow. In Bavaria and Austria, the dark counterpart to St. Lucy is the Schiachalutz, or which means the bad Lucy, or Bluatiga Lutz, which means Bloody Lucy, also called the Lutzelfrau, which means the Lucy bride, I guess, Lucy wife, Lucy woman. Usually dressed in like raggedy old ugly clothes. Here she looks like a bride, like we talked about. But usually she carries, in this case, knives or a sickle or a club or something like that. And the idea is she wanders around the earth on St. Lucy's Eve. People who are they try to appease her by setting out food offerings in the hope that she might bless their fields. Sometimes she might sneak around, come into your home, and spook you with a loud sound, and she disappeared. There might be, like a person who sneaks into your house and scares you, right? That's the thing. I know I blur the line between fantasy and reality in these videos, but usually when I talk about a supernatural figure doing something, what I mean is a person dressed up like that person does that thing. So, yeah, might sneak into your house, or she might announce herself with her empty bowl and knife and yell out, "A bowl full of blood, a bowl full of guts." Sounds like normal Christmas stuff. In some areas, what a mask, and holding her sickle, which very fortunately looks like the blade has been covered up, so that's good. Why does she have weird Lego hands? Don't know. But in some areas, she was said to throw naughty children into the river, or gut them, and then wind their intestines up on her distaff, the thing that you wind up the thread for spinning, whatever. Or they might carry a bloody human head on a plate, or scrape off the tongues and skins of bad children using shards of broken glass. Sounds real cool. Normal Christmas things. However, in a lot of communities, she's also the gift bringer, even if it's just little treats like so many of these wintertime gift bringers are, right? She comes in, she shakes out her skirts, and in her skirts there's all sorts of little treats like fruits and nuts and whatever, little sweets. Also, root vegetables, turnips and potatoes. And the older kids were smart enough to know, I could get the candy, I could grab an orange, could grab a walnut or whatever. I'm going to grab this turnip instead. Why? Because they know that there are coins hidden inside those starchy tubers. So that's the Lutzelfrau, or Bloody Lucy. Another dark version of St. Lucy went a little bit viral on Twitter. Spring, early summer, 2020. Who knows what time it actually was? Because that's here on the left. You might recognize from the right. This is our Borborka, we already talked about in our St. Barbara video. This is a Lucca. Because of her kind of superficial resemblance to a plague doctor, this image went viral, no pun intended, because of the pandemic, right? But this is a Lucca, and like the Barborka, is a traditional figure from specific regions of the former German-speaking areas of Bohemia. Obviously, the most notable bit on the Lucca is this large beak, which makes it resemble another figure called the Schnabelpert that we will talk about in a later video. But in some versions of this, this one just looks like kind of like a cone. Some of them might have a wooden frame inside that was held with a bit in your mouth so that when you clacked your real jaws, it would clack the jaws of the beak, right? Then this is held on with, it's tied behind the head, and you put a kerchief over, you wear a woman's dress. Usually it would have been a teenage boy inside this, which is true of a lot of these costume figures. Barborki, as far as I know, typically actually girls using their real hair, although probably some were boys in wigs. But as far as I know, the traditional Lucca was a boy in a dress. And the job of the Lucca was to come around house to house, inspect the quality of your housework, make sure that you've done a good job cleaning up the house, and if there's any dust left over, they use their feather duster, which is more than a bunch of feathers on a stick. Here you can see it. This is the Federwisch, the feather wipe, which is actually it's actually an entire joint of a goose's wing. Here you can see they're carrying bundles of switches, that most common of wintertime spookums accoutrement. But yeah, traditionally the goose wing feather duster. Other St. Lucy's Eve and St. Lucy's Night traditions include young men going out at midnight, searching the sky for what they call the Lucy shine, which would have been a mysterious spectral glow that its different shapes would reveal the future. Young women would also try to do some divination in the form of finding a willow tree, pulling back some of the bark, finding the green wood underneath, and then carving a cross in there. Then you wet the bark again, and you kind of pat it back in place. And then you go back at New Year's Day after it's healed and so on, and then you find that spot, you peel it back again, and then you see what new patterns have formed underneath, and those shapes are supposed to tell your future. We've seen a number of different types of divination techniques that have to do with interpreting the shapes of random things, like the Bleigieson, most notable example, perhaps. Also, St. Lucy's Night, witches were out, and it was a common day for werewolf transformations, according to historical werewolf trial testimony. And also, it was a night for a night hag called the Druda, drawn here by my friend Tracy Shepard. Very cool. The Druda is one of those sit on your chest, make it smother you, give you night paralysis, nightmares kind of night hags, right? The only way to keep her away is with a 5-pointed star pentagram, which is called a Drudenfuss, a Druda foot. I think Tracy has very cleverly here implied that the Druda has a 5-pointed foot. Very cool. Very cool detail, Tracy. Good job, you did it. All right, so if St. Lucy is not the gift bringer in Scandinavia, which she's not, she is a light bringer and she hands out saffron buns, but she doesn't bring presents to kids. Who is it? Well, in the 19th century, it was the Yule Goat, the Yulbach, a figure whose origins go back much further than the 19th century, well into the Middle Ages, and they were not always so benevolent, not always of the gift-bringing kind. In Sweden, in the Middle Ages, people thought of the Yule Goat as an invisible spirit that kind of went around and made sure that you were properly preparing for Christmas. And if not, terrible things might happen to you of the belly-slashing sort. Later, it becomes a Scandinavian custom similar to wassailing, where young men in costumes would go around door to door. They'd go to each house, they would sing terrible songs, they would do terrible little plays, they'd pull pranks. Usually one of them, this one here in the front, is dressed as the goat. This tradition was common. It's known from, it's attested to in the 17th century, and it still continues in some places. They call it Yulbaching. And yeah, you can see here's your Yule Goat, and then you have these other costumed people. They go door to door, they demand gifts, usually food and drink, and basically they'll hang around until you pay them off to leave. It's similar, it's Halloween-esque, it's a little bit trick-or-treaty, but some versions of the tradition, if they go, each house they go to, somebody from that house has to join the retinue, the entourage, as they move on to the next house. So yeah, kind of trick-or-treaty, or part of the fun is, since they're all masked, if they come to your house, they'll disguise their voices as they sing songs and whatever, and you're supposed to guess who they are, right? They disguise their voice or their body language, and then you're like, oh, you're so-and-so, blah, 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 and then you give them some treats. Okay, once you figure out who it is and they eat the food, then they go on to the next house. But anyway, in the 19th century, the Yule Goat's role all over Scandinavia shifted toward becoming a Christmas gift bringer. And usually at that point, you would have had one of the men in the family dressing up like the Yule Goat. I like this illustration very much. You can see the human face behind the mask. This one's very cool. I really like it. However, the Yule Goat as the primary gift bringer eventually gets phased out during the latter half of the 19th century and the early 20th century, and we'll talk about why that is in just a second. But in Finland, the modern Finnish gift bringer is a very Santa Claus / Father Christmas / Weihnachtmann-esque figure who is called Yulbach, whose name means Yule Goat. So Yulbach in Swedish, Yulbach in Finnish. They still call him the Yule Goat. He looks like Santa Claus, although he often has this very long beard, which to me that seems like that's a vestige of his goaty origins. Finland, of course, where they actually have reindeer and stuff. The movie Rare Exports, if you have seen that, if you haven't, I do recommend it. Is Finnish in origin, and so if you listen in the original language, you'll hear that they're actually talking about Yulbach and not Santa Claus, even though the English translation talks about evil Santas. It's evil Yulbachs. But the Yule Goat today in Nordic countries is best known in this form, right here. It's a Christmas ornament. It's made of straw, tied with red ribbons, hang it on a tree, set it on a mantle, whatever, right? These are everywhere. It's incredibly common. Like, it's a thing that you have if you're Swedish, or Norwegian probably as well. And in fact, large versions, very large versions of this ornament, frequently built in towns and cities around Sweden and Scandinavia, different Nordic countries, I should say, around Christmas time. That tradition was started most famously and continued most famously in the Swedish town of Gävle, the so-called Gävle goat, a tradition that started in the 1960s, I believe 1966. This is the Gävle goat right here. You can see, made out of giant bales of straw, lit up here in the city center. So the Gävle goat, or the Gävlebacken, so it's known in Swedish. They build it every year at the castle square and the city center. Yeah, giant version of the traditional Yule goat. Different local community groups build it at the beginning of Advent, and you might, if you've heard of it, it's probably because you have heard of it being burnt down. It is commonly the victim of arson attacks, despite different security measures, different kind of fences and such around it, and there's a nearby fire station. The goat has nevertheless been burned to the ground most of the time, most years. As of 2019, the goat was burnt or otherwise damaged 37 times out of 53 times. So sometimes if it doesn't get burnt, it gets hit with a car. Since the 80s, they've built a second smaller one at the Science Club or Science Museum or something. That one also gets burnt or destroyed as well. People are jerks. They're jerks. People are jerks about this very cool goat. I love you, Gävle goat. It has survived the last couple of years. 2020, I can feel it. I can feel it, Gävle goat. We need it. We need your survival. Anyway, so again, I feel I just kicked the can down the road. If the Yule Goat doesn't bring presents anymore in the Nordic countries, who does? Well, it's the Yule Tomten, as they call him in Sweden. In Norwegian, he might be called the Julenissen, Julemanden in Danish, Juletontu in Finnish. I probably said all of those wrong because all of your languages are crazy languages. I apologize. Scandinavia and Finland, your languages are weird. You know it. I think you know it. Anyway, typically, and speaking of which, I know, again, I don't speak Swedish, but I understand that Tomte is a gnome, Tomten is the gnome, Tomtar is some gnomes, Tomtarna is the gnomes. I know that. People listening I don't need to give them a lesson on Swedish morphology and how there's different endings that represent definite and indefinite articles. I don't. So I'm just gonna say the Tomta, or I'm gonna say the Tomten. I'm just gonna do it so it makes sense to English speakers. Swedish people, I apologize. Your country is very cool. I like ABBA very much. Please don't be upset at me. Um, I'm doing my best. Okay. So anyway, Tomten, Tomtarna. What was I saying? They're usually short. They have long white beards. They wear a conical hat or a knit cap, usually red, but some other bright color as well. They look like gnomes. They look like garden gnomes. Picture the garden gnome, or picture the gnome from that one Dutch book that David the Gnome is based on. That's it. That's Tomtar. You picture, and you've probably seen this. They become very popular decorative motifs, even in the U.S. Like, I don't know how many of these I saw at TJ Maxx last Christmas. A lot of them, and then I saw them in Germany too. They're out there. Tomtar. They're becoming a thing. They're very cute. But they weren't always associated with Christmas. Originally, the Thompson, a Tomta, a Nissa, they live in houses, barns, at a farm, and the idea is they're the tutelary spirit of that farm, right? They represent a protective power that's there to watch over the family and the farm, and there's kind of an implication that they're the spirit of the oldest ancestor, the first person in the family who died there, right? So that's kind of the implication, although that's not the surface understanding. They're just they're little gnomes who live on your farm, and they watch over your stuff, right? They're your guardian. They protect the family, the animals. They also help in the chores and the farm work, like overnight. If you think about Shoemaker and the elves, that kind of thing, right? However, they are well known to have tempers, and if you offend them, things could go really bad. They could play tricks on you, or steal stuff, or even worse, they might kill your animals. So the idea is that even though they're little, you can see here that about hobbit sized here or less. They're very strong and very fast, and they use those abilities to do incredible things in the farm work. So the idea, they usually live on the farm. Here's one chilling with a cat, very cool. Yeah, they do chores at night, like stacking the hay. They clean the stables. They sleep during the day or whatever. And then, if a family is kind to the Tomta on their farm, they'll find things like their animals are always happy. They're well taken care of. They're well groomed. The cows are more productive than other people's cows, and so on. Right? Tomtar are supposed to be they especially like horses, and so they might, if they have a favorite horse, they might braid its mane or its tail or whatever, right? So, like I said, even though they're supposed to be protectors of the farm, they do have short tempers. They are easily offended, and so if you do something to upset the Thompson, you might kick over milk buckets, might break your eggs, might scare the animals, might tie the cows' tails together, and so on. The best way to keep a Tomta happy is to leave them small gifts like cakes or little coins throughout the year, but most importantly of all, the number one most important thing, leave the Tomten a bowl of porridge with a little pat of butter on the top for Christmas Eve. The butter is important. Without this specific gift, Tomta might leave the farm in offense, or even worse, right? There's a famous story, probably the best known one, is the Tomten gets the bowl of porridge, but there's no butter on the top, and the Tomta gets so mad that he kills the family's best cow. Then he's like, I'm going to eat the porridge anyway, and then he finds out that the pat of butter was at the bottom of the bowl and not at the top, and then he feels so bad about what he's done. Then he goes around and he scours the entire countryside to find an identical cow to replace the one he killed in a rage. So that's like the best known story of that, the Tomten and the porridge. So by about the 1840s, the Tomten or the Nissa kind of in Denmark becomes um, the gift bringer, the Christmas gift bringer, instead of the Yule Goat. And they call it the Julenisse, not just the Nisse, but the Julenisse, a Yule gnome, a Christmas gnome. Then by 1881, a Swedish magazine published the poem Tomten, meaning the gnome, right, by Victor Rydberg. And this is a poem with the Tomte alone. He's out in the cold field, and he's thinking about the mysteries of life and death. And this is another one of those like examples where a poem becomes so foundational to understandings of Christmas that it influences everything. We talked about that with Icelandic stuff, how the Yule Cat poem and the Yule Lads poem changed Christmas in Iceland, just like the Night Before Christmas in English has still to this day changed our understanding of Santa Claus, right? Or formed our understanding of Santa Claus in a lot of ways. Anyway, this poem, this edition of the poem, not the one on screen, but the original one from 1881, also included the first painting by Jenny Niestrom, who much of this art is by her. That's her, that's her, that's her, right? She's the most famous painter of Tom Tar for sure. That was her first one, showing them in a Christmas setting, and because of the popularity of her illustrations, they became associated with Christmas ever since. So, shortly afterwards, obviously influenced by the emergence of Santa Claus in the U.S. and Father Christmas in other parts of Europe, as well as the Danish tradition of the Julenisse. Now, the Tomten is the Yule Tomten. He is the Christmas gnome, right? Or the Julenisse in Norway. Now, not the Yule Goat anymore, but the Yule gnome, the Christmas gnome, the Yule Tomten, is the one bringing gifts to kids. However, often the Tomten is accompanied by a goat, the Yule Goat, if you want. I like to think the Yule Goat found something else to do. It did not cease in its delivery of presents. But the Tomten and the goat, they come around. They, instead of coming down the chimney, they knock on doors of the different homes. They hand out presents. Tomten or the Nisse delivers gifts door to door. And besides the goat, you also often see Tomten with a pig. Pigs are very common symbols in not just Scandinavia, but also Germany and other parts of Europe. They're common symbols of luck for Christmas and the New Year. Why is that? Well, a pig is fat and happy. You could be fat and happy too. You want to be fat and happy like the pig, right? It's a symbol of fertility, right? It's a little thick boy. He's well fed. That could be you. Leave your bowl of porridge at Christmas for the Yule Tomten. Over time, as you might imagine, has happened to so many, influence from America, commercialism, and so on, the Yule Tomten looks more and more like just looks like Santa Claus. I don't like it, but it is happening here. I mean, look at this is the Yule Tomten. Here he is coming in the door. And like I said, Yulbach obviously straight up looks like Santa Claus, right? That's kind of a different kettle of fish. He's not exactly Santa Claus. Some things are different. He's usually not overweight. If he has reindeer, they don't fly. They just walk. But it's usually a goat or a pig. You leave out the porridge instead of milk and cookies. Also, he doesn't live at the North Pole. Maybe he lives in the forest. Or if you're from Denmark, you know that he lives in Greenland. Or in Finland, Yulbach lives in Lapland. He lives specifically in the Korvatenturi Fell, which means the ear fell, because it's ear-shaped roughly. And the idea is from up there, he can hear all the good and bad things that you're doing. Nevertheless, you still get it on Christmas cards and such. You get a traditional Tomte, the house and garden guy with a horse or a cat or on a goat, riding a goat or with a sled pulled by a goat or by a pig or whatever. So some people still hold on to the idea of the farm tomte. I like it better. I prefer the farm tomte. I'm not Swedish, so I don't get to pick. But if I had my druthers, which I don't and never do, I would like them to keep them a little less sanctified. There is, I forget where it is, and I should have looked it up before I started recording, but I didn't, so live with it. But there's a tourist attraction that's the Yule Tomten's house. You can go, but to English speakers, they just straight up advertise it as, this is Santa's house. Yule Tomten is Santa. This is his house. This is where he lives. It exists, whatever. But so now in Sweden, the word tomte becomes somewhat ambiguous. But usually the way, when you're talking about the Yule Tomten, the Christmas gnome, there's that's Tomten, the gnome, right? When you're talking about the gnome, you're talking about the Yule Tomten, you're talking about the Swedish Santa, right? But if you're just talking about Tomtar, if you're just talking about gnomes, or Tomtarna, the gnomes, you're talking more about a more traditional farm style tomte is kind of the difference, right? If that makes sense, right? If you're just talking about some gnomes did this, but if you say the gnome, you're talking about the Yule Tomten. Whereas in America, if you say the gnome, we all know you're talking about David the gnome. All right, so we have answered the question: who brings presents in Scandinavia? The answer is Yule Tomten, Julenisse, Julepuki, formerly the Yulbach. St. Lucy comes. She doesn't usually bring anything more than yellow cat buns. But she brings light, and that's important too, in the darkest time of the year. So, next time, this guy. Kinda. Until then, have a good Christmas.